There we go. What's up, everybody? How are you all doing today? We're talking about the whole issue with these GD32 chips, which I have a feeling are going to be more commonplace due to silicon shortages from across all vendors. So right now, as far as we know, Voxelab, which is owned by FlashForge, and Big Tree Tech are using these chips on their products. Now, there's a whole fiasco with Big Tree Tech getting pissed off because we pointed out that, hey, these chips are showing up, and they did actually do an official press release, whatever that means, stating that I was in fact right, that they did go out. The Voron Discord had a bunch of people trying to get the boards working. There's, I guess, a workaround with Clipper. So Clipper doesn't use any of these libraries we're going to talk about. So there looks to be a workaround with Clipper because the USB wasn't working or isn't working, or there's a workaround. Either way, they're working on getting it fixed. Them being the Clipper community, not Big Tree Tech. So what looks to have happened, if we're going to take Big Tree Tech at their word, they produced boards before the beta test, sent those out to distributors. They were supposed to hold on to them, and then they accidentally sent them out because Big Tree Tech didn't clearly label the boxes. They used the same boxes as the previous versions, and the only identifier on the actual board itself was a sticker on the bottom. And I posted a link below, and I'll show you that. And they're saying at least 60, or not 60, around 70 GD boards went out. So, and it looks like they're actually, I'm surprised they're doing this, they're offering a refund of the board, or you can send the board back and then get an STM32, which is weird because if there was nothing wrong with these chips, why are you guys doing a recall? Anyways, but the problem is the libraries these are using. A lot of people use Marlin. Clipper is still a very niche firmware. I have updated our post on our website with a response from ST that I found on Olimex's page, where ST, according to Olimex, straight up called the chips clones. The GD chips, according to the response that Olimex posted from ST, says that these are clones, and that's been on there as well. If you guys have been following the channel, Big Tree Tech called us racist, Big Tree Tech's group admin, who's personal friends with the owner of Big Tree Tech but doesn't work for them. Sorry, it's a little sketch. The amount of information this guy has for someone who doesn't work for the company, and the amount of work he puts in. But anyways, and they originally confirmed in the Discord server, this same Luke's guy, he's basically seems to be a guy who is friends with the owner of Big Tree Tech, whose name is Eric. And you can see here, this was taken yesterday, so that's why a screenshot says, so far there seems to be only about 100, and this was basically all the people in the Voron Discord going, what the hell? Like, we spent all this time trying to get these working, and it's because the processors are different. So I don't know if all the boards really had the GD sticker. I do have a bunch of tabs open here because I'm going to share with you guys. So they're claiming that all the boards had a sticker on the bottom of the board. I'll be honest, if I got a board that said GD on the bottom, I would think it's just a QC sticker. I wouldn't think that it's a different processor. So and they even admit here, it would have been a good idea to make an additional mark on the outside of the box to show it as a different SKU. And this is a mistake that we made. That's a big mistake. You know, we are no strangers to board revisions. The thing is, you know, my opinion is that it's stupid to release a board with the same exact model number when you're changing a core component, and the CPU is a core component. That's not something you just switch out with no revisions. These should have been made on different PCBs with like a V2.0 GD or something, or V2.1. Something clearly marking these as a different processor. Like, that's just sloppy work. Like, this whole thing comes down to the fact that Big Tree Tech themselves and their distributors were very sloppy. You know, I don't know if they were trying to pass them off, but the facts are that customers who ordered these boards expecting STM processors did get GD parts. So, you know, my question is, if there wasn't this big, hullabaloo online from us and even the Voron community. Nero even posted about this on his Twitter account, saying that they're swapping the chips out. Would they actually have done the recall, or would they have just not done anything? I don't know. I don't have a time machine. The whole problem with us, and I'm going to touch on this briefly. If you guys want to see the full details, you can go watch the previous video about where this guy Luke, who's personal friends with the owner of Big Tree Tech, said the only reason we said something, that I said something, is because we're racist against Chinese people and cultures. Not the fact that I'm just tired of seeing Big Tree Tech put out products that are just not working. So what I want to talk about is the libraries that these use, because the big thing and the reason why they're saying they're not releasing them is because of licensing issues. Now, I did call ST today, and the guy I talked to, he's not in the MCU division, but I, was like, hey, I want to get clarification. Are your libraries that are copyrighted for use with your processors able to be used with these? He said he didn't think so, but he needed to get me over to the MCU division. So I do have a ticket open with them, and if I get a response from them, I will give you guys an update on the response. Like I said, here I had previously found in our post here, this is in our news section, called GD32 CPU license issues, Attack of the Clones. You can see here the license itself that is the problem, because it specifically states you have to use it with ST products. And this is, and I cite my sources here, this is Alimex. This is a company, they make open source products like projects and stuff, little project boards and stuff. And you can see here, and I just want to point this out, this is, you can see this is cut off because there's sidebar, but if we go ahead and inspect the element, you can see there's actually more text here in the quote from ST themselves. So I actually got the whole quote from there because his sidebar theme is cutting it off. It's not formatting the column correctly. So anyways, this is the response that the guy who runs Alimex stuff got from GD. He said, those GD32XXX devices are effectively a kind of clones of our STM, but it's a pure piracy. No agreements of any kind between ST and GigaDevice, no license, nothing. ST legal people are in charge of this problem. So this is someone completely outside of the 3D printing world. This is from 2015 as well. I also put an archive link here, so it's there. I'm being very thorough. Regardless of how Big Tree Tech wants to spin how this all went down, the facts of the matter are that people ordered boards expecting ST processors, and because, let's just take their own words, they were poorly labeled, they went out to customers. So customers who ordered Big Tree Tech boards expecting STM processors got these GD32 processors, which are, clones, compatibles, knockoffs, whatever you want to call them. They're not ST processors. They are touted as compatible by GD themselves and many other people online, but they aren't. And I'm going to show you here. So when you're compiling Marlin, recently they switched over to the Arduino STM core library here. I thought I had the platform IO page open as well. Let's see. Oh. But these are the two GitHub links, and I think I have... All right, ST, it should be on this page here. So if I pull this up here and we scroll down, we should have the libraries here. So we have the two libraries here. You've got the framework Arduino ST STM32, which is the one that ST themselves put out, not community people. This is ST is paying people on their staff to write these libraries so their chips can be used with projects. And then we have we have the same thing, but Maple. So Maple, and I'll open these links up just so people can't say, oh, I had pre-cached pages. So I'll close these out here. This is the official ST library. This is what Marlin is now switching over to use for the ST-based products, because this library is kept up to date. If we go to the releases here, you can see there was a release published on April 21st of this year. So this is only about 4 months old. Not even. Let's just call it 4 months to be simple. So, but if we go here to the Maple library, which is what could be used on these GD processors without violating any license agreements, because this is a community member that built this. The problem here, as you can see, there's not even an official release for this software. This is a 1.0 beta, and this was out in 2019. So this library is many years out of date, over 2 years. And you can see right here, he even says, under no circumstances should these files be used in relation to any critical systems. Use of these files is at your own risk. They specifically state here, the guy who makes this, which is the library that Big Tree Tech would have to use unless GD themselves, GigaDevice, or Big Tree Tech makes their own library. This is the library they would have to use to get around the licensing issues, and any other company that uses the GD chips, which, looking at Voxelab's firmware, they did provide source. They are using the Maple libraries. The problem is Marlin has since transitioned over to not using these because, according to one of the Marlin developers, and I can't find a link or anything validating this, this is just information I got from talking directly to one of the Marlin developers, is that because this library is not kept up to date, like you can see, it's over 2 years old. It's not something they're going to want to keep using. Someone would have to take over maintenance of this branch of code, or not branch, but this repo. This is actually not a branch, this is an actual repository. So the two options, if you have an STM processor right now in PIO, like these two main options that people use, is the actual official ST libraries, which we can't use because you can see right here, this is based on the STM32 MCU cube packages. So if we click this link, we're taken to the actual ST page, and if we go to documentation here, we have a license agreement. So if we click the license agreement and open this up, we can see right here, number 4, which is what I cited before, we got the SLA 0048. It says right here, you cannot use this with anything other than ST processors. So that's as clear as it gets. So the problem here is, one, this is very outdated. This is over 2 years old. They specifically state this should not be used in any critical system. So, you know, your little home projects, yeah, it's fine. This right here, like, it hasn't been updated in 2 years. Like, that's really concerning. Now, if we go here, and I'll refresh these. So these are pull requests on this actual thing, and these are 2 issues. So we have an issue, a pull request here, and 2 issues open. We specifically see here, so Roger Clark Melbourne is the guy who maintains this repo. He's like the primary person. You can see here that he's specifically stating, now, I don't know if Big Tree Tech's going to go and call him racist, but he's saying right here, the GD32 chip is not 100% compatible with the STM32. We can see right here again, it's been removed ages ago because the GD32 is not 100% compatible with the STM32. And again here, there was partial support, but they didn't seem to be 100% compatible with the STM32. So this is the guy who's in charge of this library that they're using, specifically stating that there's problems with them. So there we go. It's pretty cut and dry. So is Big Tree Tech and all their NPCs going to go and attack them for stating this, that these chips are not, you know, working? So I do have a couple of bullet points here. So we have these 2 main libraries that we are able to use. One of them is out of date, is not being actively maintained, and it's by a community member. It's not by GD. You know, ST is actually paying somebody to keep these libraries updated and fix bugs in them, whereas the other library, which is Maple, is not. It's not being actively maintained. The last release was in 2019, and it's a beta release. So I have a couple talking points here. So, you know, what do you do with these libraries if the guy's not going to keep updating them? No one's willing to, you know, take the torch, so to speak, and keep updating these. You know, my opinion would be, if you want to use the Maple libraries and you want to be able to use these GD chips with the Maple libraries, well, then the companies that are using these chips should step up to the plate and pay developers or hire developers to keep these libraries updated so they can be used. You know, a lot of the stuff you see, and this is a generalization, it's not blank, it's not applicable to every single, you know, company that makes Chinese chips, you know, or makes chips in China, but copying the hardware or making compatible hardware is not the hard part. The hard part that, you know, costs a lot of resources and money is the software side of thing, to actually make sure you can use those products. You know, a processor that, you know, has good specs on paper and, you know, looks decent and has a good price point is, you know, easy, but continually maintaining software updates to use those chips in different projects and products is where the cost comes on. So that's where a lot of the companies that just make the hardware are able to cut costs is because they're not having this overhead of the R&D and software development. So, you know, even GigaDevice, they have libraries on their site for their processors. If you go look up their site or go on their site and go to a processor, but their libraries are from 2018 for the F103 series. I downloaded them and looked at them. I extracted and opened some of the files, and some people even said that at one point, and this is on a thread unrelated to 3D printing, that, you know, it looks like GigaDevice took ST's libraries and stripped out the copyright information. You know, I haven't done a code compare, but it wouldn't surprise me. It's not unheard of for stuff like that to happen. But the problem is that it's not, you know, it's not being updated by the company. ST is actually backing their products by putting out software libraries from them because they're the ones making the chips, and that's what GigaDevice needs to do. Ideally, GigaDevice should be the ones doing this. It shouldn't be put on the vendors that are using the processors like Big Tree Tech or VoxLab or whoever else decides to use them. The company making the chips should be supporting their products with software updates and bug fixes and patches. You know, so the thing is here, I'm just making sure I hit my bullet points here. You know, and a library has been updated in 2019, but we're using it in current code. That's a little concerning because, you know, what Marlin now is going to have to, if they want to keep supporting Maple to work with these GD chips, it's going to make their job harder because now they're going to have to integrate Maple support and ST support, and there is kind of a hybrid right now. You know, and the thing is, if you change your environment, you know, for example, one of the Big Tree Tech boards have an environment variable for the ST libraries and for the Maple libraries, but if you compile with the Maple stuff, you get errors too. Like specifically, if you're using NeoPixels, the Maple libraries throw errors and cause issues, and if you comment out the errors that the Marlin team has put in there, it still doesn't compile. So, you know, the whole thing is Marlin is moving away from Maple in favor of these new ST libraries because the ST libraries are put out by ST themselves. They should be more stable, and they're actually being supported by the company. So why are you not, you know, you're using processors that the manufacturer looks like they put them out and that's it. We're not going to release updates because their own official downloads are many years old at this point. So what do? You know, you know, the chips, for all I know, you know, I am going to test the VoxLab board. I do have the VoxLab Aquila, which has one of these GD chips on it. I am going to test and try to get builds working for it. There was, I think his name's Alex on GitHub. He does have firmware out for these VoxLab printers with the GD chips. So I'm going to poke around in his code and see how he implemented support for it, whether he's using the ST libraries. I also, in my message to ST, I asked them 3 questions. So I gave them a background. I said, you know, hey, we deal with 3D printer control boards. We release open source firmware for them. Recently, with the silicon shortage, some vendors that we publish open source software for had their products start showing up with GD32 CPUs in place of STM32s. The firmware that we build on, I put in parentheses, Marlin, uses the ST-MCU libraries for the firmware, which is what Marlin is, like I said, Marlin's switching over to that because they're actively maintained by ST themselves. I asked them 3 questions. I said, 1, are these GD32 chips by GigaDevice licensed to use the ST micro libraries? 2, does ST consider these GD32 chips clone of their STM32 products? And 3, this is the one I'm most concerned about, can we get in legal issues if we put out free open source firmware that works on the STM32 devices as well as the GD32 devices? I appreciate your time. Our company ourselves are not using or selling GD32 devices to our customers, but our other vendors that we put out software for are changing out the STM32 CPUs for the GD32 chips because of the silicon shortage that's occurring right now. And one thing I do want to know is the guy I talked to, I actually called ST. He said the MCU people don't have a phone line. They get back to over email, so I'm just waiting to hear back from them. I have the case open, so maybe they'll update while I'm streaming, but I doubt it. He said that the main holdup right now with the chips is the accessory parts to actually build the chip itself. Is the holdup. So there's, you know, all the different pieces to physically assemble the silicon into that package for a final product. They are having delays getting those actual parts. So the silicon is there, but the things to encapsulate the silicon and put the silicon into a usable form factor are where the delays are being held up. So I really appreciate the guy I talked to giving us actual information, because it does make a lot of sense. If they're not manufacturing the actual casings for their chips and they can't get them, it doesn't matter if they have the silicon, because they have no way to take that silicon wafer and put it into a usable product. So the question is, and this is why I did, the question is why I did this stream, is what do you guys think should be the solution to this? Should, companies that are using these chips, should they be the ones on the line for making sure that, Maple stays up to date if they're going to use Maple? Should GD try to get licensed by ST? I don't know if they will. What would be the ideal resolution? Because I think the facts of the matter are, or the reality is, until ST can catch up with demand, companies are going to be swapping out these processors from the STM32 platform to these GD32s because they can get the GD chips. So what it's not fair to the consumer to be sent out these products in a space where modifying the printer, updating your firmware is pretty normal. If you're an average user and you're not tinkering with your printer and you're not making firmware changes, or you're doing stuff to your printer that doesn't require firmware changes, maybe you're fine with the stock software. But, as we've seen from many vendors, it's not just one vendor. A lot of the firmware settings that these companies use, Creality, Voxelab, BigTreeTech, TiVo, GTAC, ANET, all their firmware stuff is like, it works well enough to get a printout, but they always seem to forget something, like making sure the bed stays on when it's paused waiting for a filament change. Creality's notorious for doing this. So, they'll have the filament change procedure implemented, but the bed will cool down and your part releases from the bed, which basically makes it useless. Little stuff like that I make sure we do in our firmware. And other usability stuff, like having baby stepping on, having thermal protection on. Now, companies have gotten better with the thermal protection stuff. The most recent case of no thermal protection was AnyCubic with the Mega Zero V2. They forgot to turn thermal runaway protection on for the bed. And we made a post about that. AnyCubic didn't attack us or call us racist because we pointed out that there's an issue here. The whole point of us posting that image, if you look on our social media, there was an image posted, I want to say it was a little over a week ago, where we just said that BigTreeTech is shipping these boards with these knockoff processors, which they originally said was only for beta testers, but now has been confirmed because of their incompetence that they actually went out. So whether that was the vendor themselves, or not the vendor, the distributor themselves, or BigTreeTech, I do want to say BigTreeTech definitely has a lot of blame here, because if you're going to release a product that needs to be identified differently, you need to put something on the box, you need to put something on the board, and ideally the board should have a different version number, not a sticker on the back of it that on 99% of printers, you don't see that. Your average user that's buying these boards is not going to see that. They're not going to know to look at the back and see that it's got a GD. What happens is they go and post on a forum or a Facebook group or a Discord server, and they're trying to get firmware working and it's not working. And then somebody thinks, because they're aware of this issue, to ask them what processor's on the board. This is why we posted something, because of this specific reason, to plant that seed, to let people know that these things are happening and they're not working right now with the code. Now, I would expect to see workarounds made, but the whole thing with the licensing issue is still a problem. And I'm really curious to see what ST actually says in response to this. So, and if Marlin's moving away from Maple, do now the Marlin developers need to, change direction and now maintain also this outdated Maple library support along with the ST support? Me personally, I would rather use ST chips than the GD chips, because I know ST is releasing updates for the libraries driving them, meaning there should be less bugs with Marlin and ST processors because the library is being continually updated. Now, one of the things I did notice is when, like right now, Marlin, if you compile for a BigTreeTech board or a Creality board that's using these ST libraries, the compile size is actually a lot smaller. So the ST libraries are actually more efficient with your processor's memory, which is really important for like chips. Let's say, a lot of the BigTreeTech boards a lot of the BigTreeTech boards, SKR E3 mini series, shipped with 256K of memory, which is not that much memory by today's standards. So if going from the ST libraries to the Maple libraries, means you have less, you can fit less features on the board because those libraries are not as efficiently coded. They work, but they're efficiently coded. You know, that's also an issue too, because they are more efficient. The ST libraries do pack more stuff into less code than the Maple libraries. So, and again, the Maple libraries are, they haven't been updated since 2019 and it's a beta release. So you know, what do you do here? We've dropped support for the SKRE3s, mainly because I don't want to deal with this headache. I don't want us getting caught up in a legal issue. That's why I message ST to find out what their stance is on it, because they'd be the ones that come after us. It wouldn't be, you know, Big Tree Tech or any of these other companies. They would be the ones that could potentially come after us if we're posting firmware that says it's for the GD32 chips, but then we're also utilizing the STM library. So I got to see how that all plays out. Maybe they're going to be like, well, you know, you're fine, but if you ship products with it on it, like if we started shipping boards with GD chips with STM compiled, like with firmware compiled with the ST libraries, I think we'd definitely be in violation there. But I don't have any plans to sell boards with these GD chips. Now, we already have been checking Creality boards because we sell Creality boards that have the STM32 chips. Our process before all this happened was open up and make sure the correct board's in the box before they go on the shelf. And now we're saying, okay, not only do that, but also look at the processor to make sure they say STM32 on them and they don't have a GD chip. Because if they start showing up with GD chips, one, I'm going to let you guys know, and I guarantee you Creality's not going to call us racist. And two, we're going to send them back because I don't want to have the liability of these unknown chips. You know, GD themselves is a flash memory company that was established in 2005 in China. You know, in the last, I think like 5 or 6 years is what I can see, they started making these, you know, compatible MCUs that aren't really actually compatible. And, you know, don't just take my word for it. I showed you guys other people posting that they're not 100% compatible. And that's the whole problem here. You know, I think if they were actually 100% compatible, it might have taken a while for anybody to notice that the chips have been swapped out. But the thing is, they aren't working. So, yeah, I think that's about it. So who's gonna start updating Maple? Is Marlin going to, you know, stop moving away from Maple? Are they now going to have to maintain dual environments for Maple and non-Maple? You know, non-Maple being the ST libraries. You know, it seems like it's adding a lot more work. I think if GD is not going to, you know, GigaDevice is not going to keep libraries updated, and they're not going to make sure it's officially supported within Platform IO as a framework, then the companies that are using these chips are going to have that burden of making sure that's supported and working placed on them. Because if the company themselves is like, oh, what we have is good enough, someone else is going to have to do that. And if it's not going to be GigaDevice, I think it should be the vendors that are using these processors. So, you know, I'm going to test the Voxelab. I'm going to get a Maple build compiled on it and flash it and, you know, have it hooked up and running prints and see if there's any issues with USB or, you know, timing issues or UART problems or just general lockups. One thing I do want to mention is the Voxelab firmware, even though it's set up for the Creality 512K environment, they did some modifications on the back end to limit it to 256, which is what the processors actually have. So my concern was when I see that environment string, that's the 512K environment for a Creality board, because the Voxelab board is basically a ripoff of the Creality 422, 427 series. All the pins are the same, like same features and everything, same drivers. There are 22.8s on there, I believe. I haven't removed the heatsinks, but they're silent drivers, and they've touted them as Trinamics. But luckily they were smart enough to limit the build size, because my main concern when I saw that was, okay, this is a 256K part and this is a 512K environment. This could be problems if their compile size is over that 512K. So again, coming back to the libraries again, because Voxelab is using these 256K chips on the printer I have anyways, I don't know, and I haven't seen online any other